Among the peoples of the Bible, few shared a relationship with Israel as intricate and often adversarial, yet ultimately as close as the Moabites. Throughout the Old Testament accounts, they appear as neighbors, adversaries,
Let this treaty
and a
bind our
persistent source
nations,
of spiritual
a testament
challenge
to
for God's
peace
chosen
forged
people.
from the ashes of war.
Their history is marked by conflict, fragile alliances, and enduring hostility. But to truly grasp the nature of the Moabites, we must journey to their very genesis, an origin story considered one of the most shocking and problematic in all of Scripture. Their nation did not emerge from the founding of a great city or the triumphs of a heroic king. Instead, its beginnings are rooted in the desolate aftermath of one of God's most fearsome judgments, the utter destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The lineage of the Moabite people is directly linked to Lot, the nephew of Abraham, and to a desperate, deeply flawed act carried out within a cave after the family fled the catastrophe. This foundation, conceived in sin and overshadowed by shame, profoundly shaped the destiny of the Moabites and their subsequent relationship with both God and Israel. So significant was this origin that the very law of Moses would later impose a severe and explicit prohibition, barring them from full inclusion
Hear
among
now
God's
the
people.
words of the Lord, for
Yet,
this is the
Here
covenant
lies one
he
of the
makes.
Old Testament's greatest and most often overlooked mysteries. How is it possible that a woman from this very forbidden people was not only accepted, but rose to become a central figure in the lineage of King David, and by extension, in the ancestral line leading to Jesus Christ himself? Today, we will explore the full narrative arc of the Moabites, from their dark origins to their unexpected and vital role in the unfolding plan of salvation. What we uncover will offer a profound lesson in the mysterious workings of God's providence and how His grace can redeem and transform even the most troubled past to fulfill His eternal purposes. After narrowly escaping the fiery destruction of Sodom, Lot and his 2 daughters found themselves afraid to remain even in the small town of Zoar. Seeking greater security, they retreated to the mountainous terrain and took refuge in a cave. They were alone, isolated from the remnants of the world they knew.
Keep moving!
And their future seemed utterly uncertain. They had lost their home, their intended husbands, and their mother, who had tragically become a pillar of salt. It was within this environment of profound despair and crushing isolation that Lot's daughters, their perspective undoubtedly warped by the corruption and trauma they had witnessed in Sodom, arrived at a terrible decision. Chapter 19 of the book of Genesis records their desperate rationale. The older daughter spoke to her younger sister, saying, "Our father is old, and there is no man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring from our father." In their view, twisted by trauma and their solitary state, this seemed the only possible means for their family line to survive. And so, for 2 consecutive nights, they carried out their plan, giving their father wine and then lying with him. From this incestuous
We
union,
must do it.
2 sons were born,
It is
who
the
would grow
only
to
way
become
to
the
preserve our
progenitors of
father's
2
line.
distinct nations. Genesis 19, verse 37 states, "The firstborn bore a son, and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger daughter also bore a son, naming him Ben-Ami, who became the father of the Ammonites to this day." Thus, the Moabite people did not originate from a divine promise or a sacred blessing, as was the case with Israel through Abraham. Their foundation is indelibly marked by an act of sin, deceit, and shame, occurring in the hidden darkness of a cave. This problematic beginning is far from a minor detail. It forms the very bedrock of their identity and would significantly influence their future history. particularly their tense and frequently hostile interactions with their kinsmen, the Israelites. Over time, the descendants of Moab developed into an established nation. When the Israelites, completing their long wilderness journey, finally arrived at the borders of the Promised Land, they encountered these neighboring people. But instead of finding a welcome, they met fear and overt hostility. The biblical narrative reveals that the Moabites sought to undermine Israel through two principal strategies. First, through spiritual attack, and subsequently, through moral seduction. The initial strategy unfolds in the Book of Numbers, chapters 22 through 24. Balak, the king of Moab, upon seeing the immense numbers of the Israelite camp positioned near his territory, was overcome with terror. Rather than engaging in direct military confrontation, he opted to employ what he believed was a more potent weapon, a curse. To accomplish this, he sought the services of a renowned seer of the age, a man named Balaam, promising him great wealth if he would come and pronounce a curse upon the people of Israel. Balaam attempted to fulfill the king's request, but he encountered an insurmountable obstacle: the God of Israel himself. In one of the Bible's more unusual episodes, even the donkey Balaam
taste
rode
the
was
sweetness of our
miraculously given
land.
voice to warn him that an angel of God stood in his path. This vividly illustrates God's complete sovereignty over the situation. 3 separate times, Balak led Balaam to different vantage points overlooking the Israelite camp, urging him to deliver the curse. And 3 times, as Balaam opened his mouth to speak words of malediction, only words of blessing and prophecies favorable to Israel emerged. God himself overruled and redirected the seer's pronouncements, demonstrating that no human curse could affect the people he was protecting. Having failed to curse Israel directly, the Moabites, reportedly on Balaam's advice, resorted to a far more insidious and perilous tactic. If they could not conquer Israel from the outside, they would attempt to corrupt them from within. Numbers chapter 25 recounts the tragic incident at Baal Peor. The text reveals that the Israelite men began to engage in illicit relations with the Moabite women. These women invited them to partake in the sacrifices offered to their gods, and the Israelites not only accepted, but ate the sacrificial meals and bowed down to worship their god, Baal Peor. They had fallen directly into the snare of idolatry and immorality. God's response was swift and terrible. His anger was kindled against Israel, and a deadly plague broke out and spread rapidly throughout the camp, claiming the lives of thousands. The plague was halted only when Phinehas, a zealous priest, acted decisively to purify the camp of the grievous sin. This episode underscored a critical truth. The greatest danger to Israel was not always external military might, but the corrosive seduction of idolatry and immorality, which threatened to sever their vital relationship with God. Thus, the Moabites established themselves not merely as a military rival, but as a persistent spiritual menace, a people whose influence held the potential to lead Israel into ruin. And these hostile actions, both the attempt to curse and the successful moral corruption, would have a direct and profoundly severe consequence formalized within the very law of God. The actions of the Moabites, their overt hostility in seeking a curse against Israel, and their success in morally corrupting them at Baal Peor, carried serious and lasting implications. These were not simply unfortunate incidents in Israel's history. They led to a specific divine decree, a law that erected a formal barrier between the Moabites and the people of God. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 3, we find this impactful legislation. God, speaking through Moses, commanded, "An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of them shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever." This was an exceptionally strong prohibition. To not enter the assembly of the Lord meant they could not be considered full members of the covenant community, excluded from significant participation in the communal and religious life of Israel. The phrase, "even to the 10th generation, none of them shall enter," forever emphasized the permanence of this separation. It was not a temporary measure. The Bible itself provides the rationale for this severe law. Verse 4 continues, explaining, "Because they did not meet you with bread and with water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you." God did not overlook their lack of basic hospitality towards the vulnerable Israelites journeying through the wilderness, and more significantly, He remembered their malicious attempt to employ spiritual warfare to destroy His people. From a faith perspective, this law was not an arbitrary act of divine disdain. Firstly, it was a direct consequence of Moab's hostile actions. Secondly, and crucially, it served as a protective measure for Israel. God was establishing a clear boundary to safeguard the spiritual purity and integrity of His covenant people, insulating them from the idolatrous and corrupting influence of their neighbors. So, with this divine law in place, the destiny of the Moabites seemed sealed. They were marked by their shameful origin, by their history of hostility, and now by a legal decree that excluded them forever from the covenant community. The door to salvation, it seemed, had been shut against them. It appeared to be a settled case, a final separation ordained by God Himself. But, as we are about to discover, God's plan is invariably larger, more mysterious, and infinitely more merciful than any law, taken in isolation, might suggest. Because it is precisely within this narrative of rejection and separation that God would sow the seed of one of the most beautiful redemption stories in all of Scripture. For centuries, the law recorded in Deuteronomy seemed to represent the definitive word on the Moabites, a closed door, an eternal separation. Yet God's redemptive plan transcends our literal interpretations of legal statutes. To underscore this truth, during one of the most tumultuous periods of Israelite history, the era of the Judges, God introduces a story that seems to come from an entirely different reality. A story of profound love, unwavering loyalty, and unexpected redemption. It is the story of Ruth, the Moabitess. The narrative found in the book of Ruth begins with a poignant irony. Due to a severe famine in Bethlehem, whose very name means house of bread, an Israelite family led by a man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi made a seemingly unthinkable decision. They migrated to seek refuge in the land of Moab, the forbidden territory. There their two sons married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. But tragedy soon befell the family. Elimelech died, and shortly thereafter, both of his sons also passed away, leaving Naomi utterly alone, a widow stripped of her children in a foreign land, accompanied only by her two Moabite daughters-in-law. Upon hearing that the famine in her homeland had ended, Naomi resolved to return to Bethlehem. With a generous but broken heart, she urged her daughters-in-law to return to their own families in Moab, encouraging them to seek remarriage and build new lives. Orpah, weeping, kissed her mother-in-law goodbye and departed, making the logical and understandable choice. But Ruth clung to Naomi and steadfastly refused to leave her side. And here, in Ruth's reply, we find one of the most moving declarations of faith and devotion recorded in the entire Bible. She said to Naomi, and we read this in Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 and 17, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also if anything but death parts me from you. Let us consider these words carefully. This is far more than mere affection between a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law. Ruth the Moabitess is here making a profound covenant. She is explicitly renouncing her land, her own people, and most importantly, her ancestral gods, such as Chemosh, to fully embrace the people of Israel, and above all, to accept the one true God, Yahweh, as her God. It is a complete conversion, an act of genuine faith springing from a heart transformed by the love and testimony she had witnessed in her Israelite family. With this momentous decision, Ruth, the foreigner from the forbidden nation, voluntarily chose to align herself with the people of the covenant, not by the accident of her birth or bloodline, but by a conscious, heartfelt act of faith. And so, the two widows, Naomi, the Israelite woman embittered by life's hardships, and Ruth, the Moabite woman filled with new faith, set out together on the journey back to Bethlehem. They did not know what awaited them, but Ruth's extraordinary act of loyalty and faith had set in motion a divine plan that would transcend barriers and forever alter the course of salvation history. Ruth's arrival in Bethlehem alongside Naomi immediately raises a vital question. If the law of God in Deuteronomy was so unequivocal in prohibiting Moabites from entering the congregation of Israel, how could this story not only occur, but be celebrated and preserved within the biblical canon? The answer to this seeming paradox holds one of the most beautiful lessons about the very heart of God, the mystery of grace. The law in Deuteronomy served as a protective boundary for Israel, a consequence of the collective hostility and corrupting influence of the Moabite nation as a whole. But it was not necessarily an inescapable, predetermined curse upon every single individual born of Moabite descent. What God ultimately looks upon, above all else, is the heart. And Ruth's heart had been transformed. Her heartfelt declaration, "Your people shall be my people and your God my God," was an act of genuine spiritual conversion. In a profound sense, she ceased to be a Moabitess in the spiritual realm and joined herself to the people of the covenant through her personal faith. Upon their arrival in Bethlehem, Ruth's virtuous character and her unwavering loyalty to Naomi quickly drew the attention of a good and respected man named Boaz, who happened to be a close relative of Naomi's deceased husband's family. Under Israelite law, there existed a unique institution known as the kinsman redeemer, a relative who held the sacred obligation to care for and protect relatives who found themselves in distress, whether by redeeming their lost property or marrying a widowed relative to ensure the family name and inheritance continued. Boaz recognized Ruth's faith, her virtuous character, and her exceptional loyalty, and he decided to act as her redeemer. He married her, thereby restoring the honor and securing the future of both Naomi's family line and Ruth herself. This act of redemption brought Ruth, the foreigner, fully and blessedly into the community of Israel. From the perspective of our faith, this story is far more than simply a beautiful, ancient romance. Ruth serves as what we call a type or a foreshadowing of the church. As a Gentile, a non-Jew, she represents all the peoples and nations of the world who were not part of the original covenant with Israel. And Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, acts as a powerful figure of Christ. Just as Boaz redeemed Ruth and took her as his wife, Christ, our Redeemer, rescues us, the church, comprised of people from every nation, and makes us his bride, including us irrevocably within the family of God, not based on our own merits or our worldly origin, but by his pure grace, received through our faith in him. And so, we conclude our journey through the often hidden history of the Moabites. We began in the darkness of a cave, with a nation born of shame and despair. We saw how they developed into a proud and hostile people, a neighbor who actively sought to curse and corrupt Israel. We recalled the severe law of God that seemed to erect an eternal barrier between them and the people of the covenant. The fate of Moab appeared sealed by their origins and their actions. But then, amidst that darkness, God ignited a light of hope in the most unexpected of places: the heart of a Moabite woman named Ruth. Her unwavering faith, her courageous loyalty, and her heartfelt decision to embrace the God of Israel changed everything. The story of Ruth teaches us perhaps the most essential lesson in all of the Bible. God's grace is infinitely more powerful than our past, our perceived limitations, or the weight of our origins. The sin committed in a cave seemed destined to define the fate of an entire people, but the faith of one woman, expressed in a barley field, ultimately changed the course of salvation history forever. The law of God is undeniably holy and just. It reveals His perfect standard and the rightful consequences of sin. But the singular case of Ruth reveals to us that God has always valued a converted heart and sincere faith far above any human origin or nationality. She stands as a testament that God does not judge nations as an inseparable, monolithic block, but that His boundless mercy is always available to the individual who turns to Him with genuine humility and trust. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the surprising story of the Moabites. If you wish to continue delving into stories of redemption and the profound truths found within the Bible, we invite you to explore the videos appearing on your screen now. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can continue discovering the infinite richness of our faith together. May God bless you, and until next time.